Welcome to the budget for renewal. Will we really press the reset button and spur the economy into what it deserves to be, an economy of growth, promising the East to the rest of the world? We're going to get all important voices on the budget for renewal as ET Now brings you a series of shows on the lineup to what the Finance Minister is likely to deliver on Budget 2012. My special guests, Vikram Mehta, Mohandas Pai, and I also have with us Pramod Bhasin. Also joining me in the studio is Arun Nanda. Thank you very much, sir. Mr. Nanda, I'll start with you. Most people say this is going to be a tick-mark budget, not a game-changing one. How convinced are you?
I think it will be more populist with the election going on. I'm not expecting anything radical out of the budget because I don't think a year before elections any party would like to come with a radical budget.
If there was one big idea, though, what would you pick in the budget this time?
I think we should get some disinvestment out and cut down our deficit, and also focus on the inflation part of it. Availability of money.
Find more resources, the key point. Let's get to Vikram Mehta now. Vikram, what is your take on the budget expectations? Are you really putting out a long list, and if so, what might that contain?
I would hope that the government does something tangible with regard to the subsidies, especially those for petroleum products. And one of the items that I would recommend the government consider is to replace or reduce the subsidies for kerosene and replace that with the disbursement of free solar lanterns and cookers. The fact of the matter is that we cannot control our fiscal deficit if we don't disconnect subsidies from pricing.
Mr. Mohandas Pai, Vikram Mehta feels that we should have fiscal consolidation as the key thinking in this budget. Subsidies are a complete no-no. What's your feeling about it? Will the fisc be managed by Budget 2012?
Well, I think the most important objective for the Finance Minister should be fiscal consolidation. After the elections in UP and considering the global situation, India's fisc has gone out of control. The fiscal deficit may be about 5.5% to 6%. Revenues are not coming up, expenditures going up. There's a huge amount of unpaid bills. Borrowings are very, very high and hurting the economy. So my expectation is that the Finance Minister should focus on fiscal consolidation. He must try to cut spending. He must make sure that he does not borrow more money. He must make sure that the tax collections go up because of better administration, not increase in tax rate as inflation is high.
Okay, inflation is high. Don't increase tax rate. Would you agree with that? Does that augur well for an economy that's facing growth versus inflation as a challenge?
You know, I agree with Mohan on the issue of keeping the tax rates where it is and improving. In fact, I think we should be a little more liberal on the double taxation of dividends. But I don't know in a budget 1 year before election whether they would cut down expenditure or cut down subsidies, and that's why I go back to my earlier idea. They'll have to find something which doesn't hurt the common person, and that disinvestment seems to be one of the areas to get out of.
But Vikram Mehta, let's look at taxation as a piece, and as somebody who's sort of been looking at the economy where we have faced challenges of whether or not we can raise enough funds and at the same time bring more services under the tax net. Do you think from a corporate India's point of view we will see a little more tinkering on the service tax?
Well, there is an urgent need to do something about GST, and clearly all of us are hoping that the government will have the political will to take that forward. There's also an urgent need to broaden the tax base. Today, I think maybe only 1/3 of those who have PAN cards actually end up paying taxes. So it's not so much a question of raising the tax rates. It's really a question of making the tax collection more efficient and by finding more and more people who will pay taxes. So clearly at this juncture, one of the key requirements for the government and for the Finance Minister is to somehow change the mood within the economy. Today the mood is somewhat downbeat. He has to introduce a budget that will reverse this mood. he has to actually tackle some major reform initiatives.
Okay, reform initiatives. Pramod Bhasin, do come in here and we'll get a sense from you about what do you think is the biggest reform that we need. Is it tax reform? Is it divestment like Arunanda is saying? Which one would you pick?
You know, the biggest reforms that we need through the budget process is on taxes. Now, I don't think that all of those are going to go through. All the reforms that we were expecting will actually happen. I just think the government and the opposition are not in a state where these sorts of things will get carried through. But these are vital for India. They can accelerate our growth, they can make life easier, they can make doing business in India much easier. So I think mainly on that side, I hope we can get a lot more clarity and simplification of the entire tax regime. Even if we can make some steps partially there, that would be a major move forward for us.
Let's get Mr. Pai's view. Service taxes, personal taxes, excise. Look at all of this. Corporate India versus the personal income story. What are your expectations?
Well, I think if you look at service tax collection, you obviously will expand the number of items subject to service tax. He's been talking about it. He may come out with a negative list, and that is not at all bad for the economy. I don't expect him to increase excise duty. I expect him to increase the initial slab for individual income tax. And I hope that he'll bring in simplification of tax rules so that higher compliance will come, because this will increase buoyancy. But I think he should focus on cutting spending. There are a lot of areas where he can cut spending to make spending much more effective, much more targeted. Subsidies are going out of control, while most subsidies have an objective. Subsidies on fuel, subsidies on, let's say, exports, and subsidies in some areas can easily be cut.
Mr. Nanda, while you've got taxes on one hand, the other is about this whole DTC. We're all expecting the direct tax code to come through only by April 2013, and that is likely to bring in GST together. It's no longer going to happen one behind the other. Do you think that's a good move? Do you think that's delayed from a corporate India's point of view, and it will have an adverse impact?
You know, it's been delayed. One of the things which DTC will do is will bring a steady tax regime, because today what's happening is that people are a little worried, and you've seen that in litigation as well as in implementation of the tax. I think DTC is delayed too long. And on the GST, I think somehow they have to, the political parties have to understand that they can have the political differences, but primarily everybody agreed to GST. It's now they're making an issue out of it. It's not that when BJP was in power, GST was not thought about.
But the point is that, you know, with this kind of delay, is the kind of benefit that we were looking from both of them going to sort of get a bit diluted? Or do you think that, you know, the budget, therefore, will have nothing to offer on taxation because they expect this to come through next year?
I personally am not expecting anything much out of the budget, except that they will do things like expanding the service tax net, and they might expand look at other opportunities. My personal view is subsidies are, you know, we've seen how this government has worked, and, you know, if anything makes me lose sleep is the food subsidy after Narega, because on both counts, it's the cost to the exchequer as well as people not wanting to work, and we're seeing that in the unskilled labor category. Which
at some level, Narega, as people have been pointing out, is also adding to inflation anyway. We won't take a stand on that. But Vikram Mehta, you know, 1 lakh crores is the budget estimate on fuel, fertilizer and food subsidy. I mean, you were talking about that being the single most important demand for reform at this stage. If you were to just put that aside and just pick up divestment from where we expect to shore money, do you think our failure of even reaching 40,000 crores suggests that we may not be able to reach any target that we may set in the future?
My own hope is, and advice would be that this investment must not just be focused on the dilution of some shares. They must be also looking at bringing in strategic partners. But I think there is no reason whatsoever for the government to miss the target of 40,000 next year.
Well, Mohandas Pai, what do you think the government is doing about extracting more out of public sector companies? I mean, I know the markets haven't been great. Of course, now they're doing very well. But in the last year or so, they've been very, very volatile. Could the government get more out of its public sector units?
Well, I think divestment has not worked because the government is very slow to take decisions and the markets have not been good. I would expect that quite possibly he will announce right now that he's going to clear divestment in some stock. But I would expect that he will ask the public sector to pay out much more dividends. You know, the public sector has got about 2.5 lakh crores of cash between about 10 to 12 companies. And I don't see why they cannot pay maybe 50,000 to 75,000 crores as dividend, so the government gets a lot of money without having to divest. I find it very funny that these companies are accumulating a lot of cash without paying out huge dividends which they can, and that will get him much more money easily rather than going to the process of divestment. So I would expect some innovative things to happen by the finance minister in the budget.
What do you think, Mr. Nanda? Is that something that the government might exercise, getting more out of the public sector?
I think that's the easiest thing, and it doesn't hurt anybody.
But they haven't done that so far.
I don't think they're innovative.
Mr. Pai would agree with that, wouldn't he? Okay, let's get down to sector specifics. Real estate is your sector. What are you expecting? A flattish budget? Some of the bad news has been factored into real estate, I think, over the last few budgets. So not much there?
I'd like to see some sort of, for infrastructure. You see, affordable housing, they should do something. Houses below a certain price. And, you know, and what I mean by affordable housing is something which a man who earns 8 to 10,000 rupees a month can buy a house. You know, some incentives in that area, maybe a better tax credit or some sort of a fund. You know, like we did create two funds, IDFC, and then we had the other one, but nothing much has been done in the infra funding area, and we need some SOPs to mop up retail money in for that.
Okay, you know, Vikram, there is talk about an infra debt fund that's been coming around for some time. There's hope that the finance minister will use 2012 as the budget to announce that. From an infrastructure point of view, what kind of concessions or leeway do you expect the finance minister will give on the table?
Well, you use the word expect. I mean, I'm not saying I expect this, but I hope that from, let's say, energy, if you were to consider that to be infrastructure, the finance minister will do three things. One is that he will clarify the tax position with regard to exploration and production of oil and gas. Two, he will grant gas and LNG declared good status so that it incentivizes investment in gas. And three, as I already mentioned, he will disconnect the subsidies from pricing.
Huge cost of doing business. Mohandas Pai, technology sector, you're the one who's familiar with this in a big way. What do you think the government will deliver? And whether or not the tech sector really deserves anything from the budget anymore?
Well, I think there could be some SOPs on research and development, like additional deductions. But, you know, the tax department is not allowing companies to claim all these SOPs. I don't know what impact these SOPs will have at all. I would prefer a lower rate of tax and no deductions at all, no SOPs, and a very clean administration. You declare so much of income, you pay the tax, and the matter should end there. Because the more SOPs you have, the more the tax laws get complicated, and more the income tax department is bent upon making sure you don't enjoy the SOPs, and they deny you the SOP for various reasons which are not very genuine. So I would say just simplify the tax laws and simplify the rules and keep it simple. Don't give any SOPs.
Okay, keep it simple. I overheard you saying simplification is key, but this is not the first time you're saying that, Mr. Nanda. Everyone has said this for many years, many budgets.
You know, our lawyers benefit more than anybody else. And I think that's why I told you that if the DTC comes, at least we know of a steady tax regime and simplified. You take, because we've got too many amendments and too many concessions. People interpret it differently. Departments don't want to give you, you go into appeal. I think we need to get that behind us. Business should focus on business and not on tax planning.
Should not focus on tax planning. Let's pick up an issue that you're very much clued into as well. Foreign direct investment. Could the budget 2012 become a platform to announce some of the positive moves on FDI? Do you expect that to happen?
I think FDI is needed. If you're talking of just for infrastructure spending $1 trillion. If you don't make FDI attractive, it's not going to come. We need the money. Your markets need the money. The moment FDI comes in, rupee becomes stronger, and you see the markets go up. All these are linked. Why are we still sitting with that we don't want FDI in retail? Believe you me, the farmer will benefit more than anybody else.
You think so? The farmer will benefit? Okay. Mr. Pai, is your view any different?
I think the issue of FDI should be independent of the budget, and decisions should be taken immediately after the UP elections and not wait for the budget at all. And well, he could take the budget as a opportunity to increase FDI in many sectors. I think he has to be very bold about FDI. because it's been spoken about for so many years. FDI in insurance, FDI in retail, FDI in other areas, to create a condition that where any foreigner could come and set up a company and own majority or maybe own 100%. I don't see why we should have limited holding for any investment that comes to India, because India is an open, competitive market.
Time for yet another break. In a country that's obsessed with numbers, we're going to cut the clutter a bit and talk about real issues as well. After all, the budget has on itself the onus of putting out serious money for education, for skill development, for poverty, investing in food and infrastructure. We'll be back with those key subjects on the show.